Hello to friends of Bevis Mark Synagogue and to all of those who love the traditions of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews. Today I have quite a treat in store for you. We're going to be talking about something that you may have never heard of before, or never seen, or certainly never heard before, and that is a shofar made out of a goat's horn. This shofar we're going to sound at the very end of this video, and so make sure to wait until the very end if you want to hear what a goat's horn actually sounds like. And so where did this shofar, where did this goat's horn come from? Well, the story of this shofar dates back to my son. My now almost 2-year-old son was searching through the gavetas, through the storage boxes at each seat in the synagogue, and discovered this shofar. I was quite excited when he found it because I'd previously been asked by Zachary Ettinger, the assistant minister, the sexton at Shearith Israel, the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue of New York, whether or not there were any shofarot in the collection of Bevis Marks. And I told him that I didn't think so, that the shofarot were probably always the possession of the ministers of the congregation. And so as a result, we didn't have any in the synagogue collection. I wrote back to him quite excited that in fact we had found a shofar. I sent him a photo of the shofar, and he responded that this seems to be a Western European shofar, probably made from a goat horn, likely 19th century or perhaps earlier. I was intrigued. I'd never really heard of a goat horn shofar. However, upon doing a bit more research, found that it actually is something that had been quite common. Jeremy Montague, the late Jeremy Montague, wrote in a work that he published in 2015, The Shofar, Its History and Use, he wrote, "Today almost everywhere we get our shofarot from Israel. Most ordinary Israeli shofarot are from rams. European shofarot, on the other hand, and those from Morocco, are from goats." And so today we're much more familiar with the ram's horn, and that's, if you ask a typical person, what is a shofar? They'll simply translate it as ram's horn. However, that wasn't always the case. Now, what exactly was the custom within Spanish and Portuguese communities? Well, it's not entirely clear. It requires a bit more research. It seems that some shofarot that have been discovered are the goat horn, while some other of the shofarot have been the ram's horn. So a bit more research is necessary, and Zachary and I are hoping to do a bit of a study about what different Spanish and Portuguese communities historically have used. And so if anyone watching this video is familiar with the shofar that's been used in one of the many Spanish and Portuguese communities over the centuries, please do reach out so that we can include you in our study. The shofarot themselves are a bit different in terms of their structure. A goat shofar is a bit more of an elliptical shape, while the ram's horn has a bit more of an asymmetrical shape to it. Now, what is going on over here? Why are most shofarot today made out of ram's horns? Well, that's for the following reason. The halakha prefers a ram's horn. In fact, Rambam actually said that one has to use a ram's horn. However, Shulchan Aruch said that it's simply preferable. Why is it preferable? Well, that's because the Talmud tells us that the ram's horn invokes the memory of Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, where God had mercy, and instead of having Isaac offered up upon the altar, Abraham was able to offer up a ram instead. And so we invoke this story through using a ram's horn for our shofar, so that we too should receive God's mercy, and we should not be sacrificed, but God should accept, shall we say, our prayers in place of that, our service in place of ourselves. And so this has become the widespread practice to use a ram's horn. However, the halakha recognizes that there were times where a ram's horn was not readily available, and so it was permitted to use a shofar made out of other kinds of horns, as long as it wasn't a cow's horn, which would have reminded God of the sin of the golden calf. And so other than that, one can use other kinds of horns, and goat's horns seems to have been somewhat common. Now, were goat's horns so much easier to find in Western Europe than rams? I don't really know, and that's something worthwhile to look a bit more into. But it does seem to be the case that they use the goat's horn. What's interesting is there does seem to be a reason, perhaps two prefer the goat's horn, at least originally. And that's because in the Mishnah, in the ancient rabbinic work, it says the following: Kol ha-shofarot kisherim. All shofars are kasher. However, the author of the Mishnah adds, Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah shel Ya'el pashut, that ideally the shofar for Rosh Hashanah should be a straight goat's horn. Rabbi Yehuda, however, said, Rosh Hashanah tokin b'shel zecharim, that on Rosh Hashanah one should sound a ram's horn. What exactly are they debating? Goat's horn, ram's horn? Well, the Talmud explains that it actually has to do less with the horn itself than with the shape of the horn. The Talmud explains that it has to do with what is the essence of Rosh Hashanah. In other words, everyone agrees that on a fast day one should use the ram's horn because the ram's horn is bent, and that reflects, shall we say, the mood of a fast day, a day which is about contrition, remorse, looking back, feeling humbled, feeling bent over. And so we sound the bent over horn to reflect the way that we feel or the way that we should feel on a fast day. However, the question is, what should one be feeling on Rosh Hashanah? Is Rosh Hashanah a day of repentance, as it's the beginning of the 10 days of repentance, and therefore one should use the ram's horn to reflect the remorse, the contrition we should feel at the beginning of these days of awe? Or is Rosh Hashanah not about repentance, but actually about a day of simply celebrating the new year, recognizing that God is the creator of the world, and about committing ourselves to the way that we want to be in the year ahead, that we want to be yashar, we want to be straight, we want to have a simple piety, that we want to live in an upright, moral fashion. And that is reflected in using a straight horn, which comes from a goat. And so this is actually a debate about what is the essence of Rosh Hashanah. What's interesting is that while in some Jewish communities you have part of the liturgy of Rosh Hashanah which is about teshuvah, repentance, about the fact that we are being judged on this day, for the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, the day is much more focused on simply celebrating that God is the master of the world, and that idea that we are committed to being servants of God, of living according to the principles of the Torah. And so perhaps for the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, it was considered preferable to use this kind of horn, a goat's horn, one that was straight, that actually reflected the ideas contained within the Spanish and Portuguese Jewish liturgy for Rosh Hashanah. What's interesting is that even among Spanish and Portuguese communities that did have a ram's horn, that ram's horn seems to have been straightened. And so perhaps that was a way of those communities of, shall we say, fulfilling both views. On one hand, using a ram's horn to invoke the binding of Isaac and to do what was considered ideal in the halacha, but straightening it to also incorporate that idea of being yashar, of being simple in one's faith during this day as well. I wanted to sound the goat shofar for the synagogue. Unfortunately, the shofar that we have here has some cracks and holes in it, and it's problematic to sound a shofar which has these kind of cracks and exactly how you repair them. And so instead we used the ram's horn this year, but then at the end of the service I did a few blasts out of the goat's horn so we could all hear what it sounds like. And so I'm going to sound for you from both shofarot so that you can hear the way that they sound and the way that they are actually a bit different from one another. I'm now going to sound the goat's horn for you. And so there you have it. If you're interested in learning more about the Spanish and Portuguese Bevis Marks, please be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. But for now, I'm just going to wish all of you a Tisku L'Shnim Rabot, many good years ahead.